My name is Kara Ellison. I'm 34 years old, and this is the day I stopped being anyone's daughter. You forged documents and stole from us. She's not our daughter anymore. That's what my father says to my face in open court under oath. Not a whisper, not a misstatement, not a slip of the tongue. He says it loud, clear, meant to echo, meant to kill. We're sitting in a courtroom in downtown Phoenix. Family court. Marble floors, creaky oak chairs, and sunlight leaking through vertical blinds like interrogation beams. My mother sits beside him in a mauve suit, hands folded neatly in her lap, her wedding ring flashing like a knife. I sit at the other table, alone. I feel the sting in my chest, not because it surprises me, but because it doesn't. He says it like it's a formality, like he's cutting ties with an employee who failed performance review. His lawyer nods. My mother stares at the judge, not even flinching. There are 3 people in the gallery, a reporter, a court sketch artist, and one man in a gray hoodie sitting in the very back. I don't have to look to know who he is. He's not here for them. He's here for me. I reach into my bag and take out the folder. One folder, labeled nothing. I place it on the table, slide it forward gently like a gift. The judge raises an eyebrow. Ms. Ellison, is this your exhibit? No, I say. It's not evidence for this case. The room tilts slightly. It's a sealed file, I say, delivered under Title 18, subsection 286. Please open it. The judge glances at the clerk. They exchange a look, cautious, curious. She peels it open. And then she stops. Her eyes don't move. She reads something, and her lips part. I hear it just faintly, the sound of shoes in the hallway. Controlled. Tactical. Then the doors burst open. 10 federal agents enter silent as smoke all plainclothes, each with a badge in hand and purpose in their posture. My mother lets out a sound like a gasp caught in her throat. My father stiffens. His lawyer jolts to his feet. What is this? The man in the hoodie at the back stands and says the line I've been waiting 3 years to hear. We'll take it from here. You might be wondering how we got here. How a daughter ends up on the other side of a courtroom watching her own parents get served by the United States Treasury and escorted out like criminals. You might be wondering what I did, or what they did, or how any of it became this. I'll tell you. But first, you need to understand something about me. I don't bluff. I don't provoke. And I never ever open my mouth without knowing exactly what's going to happen next. So when I walked into that courtroom today, I didn't come to argue. I came to end it. 3 years ago, I still thought there was a version of this story that didn't end in handcuffs. I thought I could fix it quietly. I thought blood would mean something. But blood lies. Blood launders money. Blood uses your social security number to build shell corporations in the Cayman Islands. Blood tells you to smile at Christmas dinner while they reroute 6-figure wire transfers through stolen accounts and then gaslight you into silence when you notice. Blood said I was crazy. Blood sued me for libel. Blood hired private investigators to follow me across state lines, so I stopped trying to prove I was innocent and started proving they were guilty. My name is Kara Ellison. I am not a lawyer, I am not a politician, and I am not a daughter, not anymore. I am a forensic financial analyst. I've worked with the U.S. Treasury, the DOJ, and federal task forces most people think only exist in bad Netflix thrillers. My job is simple: follow the money until it burns down the lie. And 3 years ago, I started following a lie with my name on it. It took me 2 years to build the file, 9 months to get it sealed, 6 days to coordinate with the sting unit, and exactly 14 minutes in court to watch the people who raised me fall completely apart. As the agents move toward the plaintiff's table, my mother stands and clutches her bag like someone might take it. My father's face goes white. Not rage, not defiance, just fear. The kind of fear that knows it's not walking out of the room the same way it came in. Ms. Ellison, the judge, says carefully, this file contains sealed documentation alleging federal crimes outside the jurisdiction of this court. Yes, Your Honor, I reply. It does. The lead agent steps beside me and nods. The man in the hoodie, my contact silent, until now speaks softly to the bailiff. 3 of the agents flank my parents. You'll want to come quietly, one of them says. This isn't a hearing anymore. It's a takedown. I don't smile. I don't cry. I just watch. The way a surgeon watches a last stitch hold. The way a survivor watches the fire go out. And I realize as they walk past me cuffed and wordless, I don't need them to admit it. They don't have to say they were wrong. They don't even have to say my name. Because justice just did it for them. I used to think love and loyalty came pre-installed in family like a birthright, like something you didn't earn and couldn't lose. But now I know better. My name is Kara Ellison, born and raised in Scottsdale, Arizona. My father, Robert Ellison, is or was a respected man in real estate circles, spoke on panels, donated to local politicians, helped build subdivisions that look like catalogs for the American dream. My mother, Janice, was the face of it all. Warm, polished, perfectly posed. They were the couple you'd want at your fundraiser, the ones who gave advice on retirement portfolios and invited the pastor to their 4th of July parties. And I was the quiet one. I had no desire to sell homes or host cocktail events. I wanted numbers, equations. I wanted the truth underneath what people called value. I knew how to read balance sheets before I was 15. By 17, I'd spotted my first inconsistency in my father's miscellaneous business expenses. I brought it up at dinner once asked why an Arizona-based LLC was paying monthly to a P.O. box in the British Virgin Islands. My father didn't even blink. He said, "Don't embarrass yourself by pretending to understand things you're not ready for." My mother gave me that tight-lipped smile, equal parts pity and warning, and changed the subject. That was the last time I asked them anything that mattered. I left for the University of Chicago on a full scholarship, double majored in economics and criminal justice. While my peers were competing for jobs at Goldman or Deloitte, I took an internship no one had heard of Department of the Treasury Division 52. I signed my first non-disclosure agreement at 21. My real work started after grad school silent investigations coordinated with the IRS-CI and Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, FinCEN. I traced dirty money through shellcore like it was blood through veins. Most people don't realize how fragile the illusion of legit business really is. All it takes is a whisper in the numbers, a signature in the wrong place, or a payment made 2 minutes too soon. And when you know what to look for, the truth starts screaming. For years, I never looked at my family's businesses. I didn't want to. Some part of me still clung to the fantasy that maybe, just maybe, they were as clean as they looked. That they hadn't just raised me to look sharp, speak clearly, and stay useful, that I meant more to them than image management. But then one day, while cross-checking vendor names for an unrelated case in Nevada, a name popped up in a flagged transfer, Ellison Growth Fund, LLC. That wasn't an official family entity. It wasn't registered under my parents' real estate umbrella. And yet there it was linked to a stream of consulting payments from 5 different states, all tied to real estate development permits. It was laundering money through construction contracts using shell vendors who didn't exist. I dug deeper, and then it hit me one of the names used to authorize the wire transfers was mine. My name, my social, my signature. Forged. Used in transactions I'd never seen. And not just once, dozens of times. I flew home the next weekend. I remember standing in the living room of the house I grew up in, the smell of lemon polish and staged perfection. My mother was arranging flowers for a charity brunch. My father sat reading the Wall Street Journal like we were still in 2003. I showed them printouts. They didn't deny it. My father folded the papers once and said, "You need to be very careful with what you're implying." My mother didn't say a word. She just looked at me like I was a stain she couldn't remove from the carpet. I told them I was going to the authorities. My father smiled, and said, "You really want to declare war on your own blood." They filed a civil suit against me 5 days later, claimed I was mentally unstable, that I'd tried to extort them, that I was obsessed, vindictive, dangerous. My bank accounts froze. I was put on temporary leave from Treasury for evaluation. I received an anonymous package with screenshots of messages I'd never sent claiming I threatened former colleagues. Someone wanted me discredited. Someone who had the resources and the ruthlessness to ruin me. But what they underestimated was that they didn't raise a daughter. They raised a weapon. For the next 8 months, I went dark. No contact, no social, no traceable movement. I started my own file. I created mirrored data backups. I pulled property records, SEC filings, IP addresses, offshore registrations. I mapped everything where the money came from, where it went, whose names were used, who signed what. I found 14 ghost companies tied to their operations, 3 foreign accounts linked through encrypted payment channels, and 1 LLC registered in my brother's name, my brother Nathan, the one who vanished 6 years ago after a family disagreement and never came back. I tracked down his last known address, rural Oregon. I drove 12 hours straight. When I found him, he was living under a different name, working construction. He said only one thing when I knocked on his door: "It took you long enough." Nathan was the missing piece. He had documents I couldn't access, records he'd copied and saved the night he confronted our father. He'd tried to report them once. No one listened. He gave up, started over, but he never stopped watching. We spent 3 weeks comparing files. Together we built the case. And when it was ready, I sent it sealed to the U.S. attorney. Then I waited for the right moment, the right courtroom, the right humiliation. I wanted justice to land like a hammer, not for revenge, for truth. The court summons arrived on a Tuesday. Certified mail, thick envelope, official-looking header. It accused me of defamation, wire fraud, and unlawful impersonation of a corporate officer. I laughed at first, out loud, alone in my apartment. But it wasn't funny, because it wasn't just a stunt. It was strategic. My parents had filed the lawsuit not just to discredit me, but to drag my name through the legal system before I could speak a word of what I knew. It was a silencing move, a reputational nuke. They knew what they were doing. And the most vile part, they weren't suing me as strangers. They were suing me as parents. Each line in the complaint wasn't just legal, it was personal. They called me unwell, said I had a history of delusions, said I'd made threats of violence and blackmail. They attached an affidavit signed by my mother saying she feared for her safety. I stared at that signature for a long time. I remembered her handwriting from my childhood love notes in my lunchbox, grocery lists on pink stationery. The curves of her cursive used to mean home. Now they were bullets. The damage was fast. Within 2 weeks of the suit being made public, I got an email from my department at Treasury. Administrative leave pending review. No hearings, no explanation. Just a subtle exhale of institutional distrust. I wasn't fired yet, but I was out, invisible, erased. My professional reputation was in limbo, and my personal life shattered. Old friends went silent. My father had whispered rumors into enough ears. Kara's unraveling, she's obsessed, unstable, dangerous. Even my neighbor stopped making eye contact in the hallway. I had become what they wanted, isolated. But the worst betrayal wasn't the lawsuit. It was the people who knew me and believed them anyway. Aunt Mary Ann, who once said I was the smartest girl in the family, wrote a letter to the court in support of my parents. My godfather, who used to sneak me butterscotch candy in church, emailed me to say, "It's not too late to apologize and make things right." Right. What part of this was right? They had stolen my identity, forged my name on criminal transactions, waged psychological warfare to discredit me, and somehow I was the one told to make amends. I started having dreams, not nightmares exactly. Just quiet, suffocating dreams where I would scream in a room full of people and no one would look up. Not even once. I'd wake up with clenched fists, sweat on my collarbone. Some mornings I'd sit on the edge of my bed and stare at the floor thinking, maybe I should just walk away. Let them win. Let them keep their empire. Let myself disappear. Start over. Be quiet. Be safe. But then I'd open the folder. The folder. The one with the case files. The hard drives. The notarized statements. The spreadsheet I'd built from scratch. The one that spelled out line by line what they'd done, how they did it, who they hurt. And I'd remember. This wasn't about vengeance. It was about truth. I saw my parents once during that time accidentally in the courthouse parking garage. I was walking back to my car when I saw their Lexus. They were standing beside it talking to their lawyer. I stopped. Not because I wanted to talk, but because I wanted to see. Just look. My mother noticed me first. Her mouth froze mid-word. My father didn't flinch. He walked straight over, stopped a foot away. His voice was low. I'll never forget what he said. "We made you. We can unmake you. And I think that was the moment I stopped grieving, stopped hoping, stopped needing anything from them, because only people who believe they own you would say something that cruel, and only someone who has nothing left to lose would say, "Not if I get there first." Back at home, I pulled up the sealed indictment file. It was nearly complete, but there were gaps, one signature I couldn't place, one final transaction I couldn't verify. I called Nathan. He answered on the first ring. "I'm in," he said. "Tell me what you need." He flew to D.C. the next morning. He stayed in my spare room, made strong coffee, and said very little. But when I showed him the document I couldn't crack, he smiled. "They left this behind," he said. A USB drive, tucked into a copy of his college diploma. It had everything. The final puzzle piece was in place. And with it, so was I. For the first time since this war began, I felt anchored. Not because I'd won, but because I no longer cared about losing them. They'd already left me years ago. They just hadn't said it out loud until court. I submitted the file to the U.S. Attorney's Office 2 days later. No announcement, no drama, just a courier envelope with a single note, "If you open this, be ready to follow through." K.E. and I waited. Not for revenge, not even for justice, just for the truth to finally have a place to land. And when they called back, I didn't cry. I just said, "I'll see you in court." 2-2. I didn't sleep the night before the court date, not from nerves. By then, my nerves were steel, but from something deeper, something lonelier. I laid in bed, staring at the ceiling fan as it turned overhead, blade by blade, thinking, what happens when the people who made you try to destroy you? You don't just lose them, you lose the idea of them. The version you carried through childhood, the story you clung to when things felt off but not yet broken. And when that story dies, there's a silence in your chest that takes months to name. I got up before the sun put on the navy blue suit I'd saved for years, the one I'd thought I might wear when I testified in front of Congress someday or spoke at a financial summit. I never imagined I'd wear it to take down my own family. My reflection in the mirror looked like someone who could survive a storm. I had to. Outside the street was quiet. Cool air. Gray sky. The kind of day that doesn't make promises. I walked 4 blocks to the courthouse to clear my head. The sound of my heels was the only thing that reminded me I existed. I thought about Nathan. He'd offered to come. I said no. I told him this was mine to finish, but the truth, I didn't want him to see how much it still hurt. Because it did hurt. Not because they sued me. Not because they smeared my name. But because they never once asked me why. They didn't want answers. They just wanted silence. The courtroom was smaller than I remembered. Clean, spare, clinical. The kind of room where families fight over custody or inheritance or betrayal dressed in business casual. My father sat at the plaintiff's table with 2 attorneys adjusting his tie with military precision. My mother wore pearls, a soft blue jacket. She didn't look at me. She hadn't looked at me in over a year. I took my place alone. No lawyer, no entourage, just me. And the folder. The judge entered. Everyone rose. And I swear when she sat down and opened her file, I saw it in her face. The weight, the disbelief, the beginning of the unraveling. But before that, before the reckoning, came their final blow. Because just before opening statements, their lawyer rose and presented a motion of claim that I was mentally unfit to represent myself. That's right. They were trying to have me declared incompetent, in front of a courtroom, in front of the judge, with legal documentation signed by 3 so-called independent evaluators who had never met me. All bought, all scripted. It was a dagger straight to the throat. I stood. I didn't shake, but my voice was cold when I said, "Your Honor." I'd like to respond to that motion not with words, but with one document. I opened the folder. The real folder, the one I'd spent 3 years building. I slid it across the table. The clerk took it, walked it to the judge. She opened it, began to read, and everything changed. I watched my father. He knew. I could see it in the way he stiffened, the way his hand twitched just slightly when the first page turned. He knew exactly what was inside. Not threats, not theories. Evidence. He didn't look at me, because now, for the first time, he was afraid of me. My mother still sat still, until the second page. Then she shifted, blinked fast, touched the edge of her collar like it might hide her, because she knew too. They both knew. The game was over. But the moment that nearly broke me wasn't theirs. It was the judge. She paused, set the folder down, looked me in the eyes and said softly, "Ms. Ellison, where did you get all of this?" I said I lived it. Then and I investigated it. As a federal financial analyst, the courtroom held its breath, and then, boom. The back doors opened. 10 federal agents walked in. Quiet, deliberate, like a wave with no sound. I saw one of them flash his badge. The others moved toward my parents' table. Robert and Janice Ellison once said, "You are under investigation for federal financial crimes, wire fraud, tax evasion, and identity theft." My father rose, not to run, but to deny. His mouth opened, but I was already standing, and I said to the room, "This isn't a family matter. This is federal." They didn't scream. There were no breakdowns, no shouting matches, just two people being quietly led away by a system they thought they controlled, and me watching, still breathing, still standing, still myself. But when it was over, when the agents were gone and the courtroom was empty and the clerk was packing up files, I sat back down, alone, and felt the ache of 100 versions of me collapsing all at once. The daughter who wanted to be seen, the woman who wanted to be loved, the investigator who still hoped justice would feel like victory. It didn't. It felt like survival, like crawling out of a fire and realizing the house is gone, but you're still alive. The case didn't end that day in court. No, what happened was the ignition point, the exposure. But the machine that follows the legal machinery, it grinds slow, meticulous, like a glacier melting onto concrete. There were hearings, depositions, sealed testimony, and long, silent waits between court dates where I would stare out the window of my apartment wondering how a family name can rot from the inside without anyone noticing. I still had no contact with my parents. They were out on bail under house surveillance and no longer allowed to speak to me. That was fine. They hadn't spoken to me in years anyway, at least not like people who saw me. What surprised me most in the weeks that followed was how little relief I felt. No victory lap, no emotional high, just this raw, stunned quiet, like the part of me that had been on fire for years had finally burned out and left only smoke. The Treasury brought me back quietly, not as an apology. They don't do apologies. But the administrative leave was reversed retroactively, and my clearances were reinstated without a word. I knew what that meant my evidence had held. It always would. Still, something had shifted in me, deep down, under the layers of competence and training. I didn't want to just return to old rhythms and pretend nothing had happened. I couldn't. So I said no to the promotion they offered, and instead I asked for something else. Give me the cold cases, the silenced ones, the victims who never get seen. They didn't argue. I got a desk in a back office with a flickering light and boxes of data no one had touched in years, and I made that my cathedral. I found clarity in patterns, comfort in timelines. But healing, that came slower. One night, I sat on my balcony with a mug of chamomile and realized something I hadn't been able to admit. Until then, I had spent most of my life chasing their approval, not justice. Even when I built the case, even when I exposed them, even when they were in handcuffs, part of me had still been waiting for them to turn around and say, "We're sorry. We were wrong. You were right all along." That moment never came. It never would. So I stopped waiting for it. I started going to therapy. Not the generic kind, but a specialized trauma counselor for whistleblowers and survivors of coercive control. Apparently that's a thing. And apparently I wasn't the first daughter with a badge and a scarred history of being gaslit by her own blood. She asked me one question in our first session that I still think about. She said, "Kara, what would justice look like if you weren't in the story?" And I didn't know how to answer, because I had built my entire identity around survival, around truth. around being the one who couldn't be ignored. If I didn't fight, who was I? That question stayed with me for days, until one morning in the middle of a spreadsheet it hit me. Justice isn't just what you bring down, it's what you lift up too. So I started something. Small, quiet. Like most good revolutions, I built a program off the books unofficial for Treasury interns with backgrounds like mine. Kids who didn't come from clean-cut families, who grew up learning to lie to stay safe, who knew how to decode a fake invoice before they learned to drive. I called it Project Saltlight, because salt purifies and light reveals. I only took on 3 mentees at first. A girl from Detroit whose father used her name to apply for 30 credit cards, a non-binary student from Texas who'd been cut off from their family after reporting elder abuse, and a kid from Baltimore whose older brother had vanished into the prison system for a crime he didn't commit. They didn't need lectures. They needed language. They needed to know the system, to speak it fluently, to fight with tools they were never meant to hold, and I gave them everything I could. Late one night, months after the courtroom, I got a message on Signal. From Nathan, just a photo. He was sitting in a diner, coffee in hand, wearing a beat-up hoodie with a girl about 10 years old asleep beside him in the booth. Caption, meet Olivia. She's mine, and she'll never have to lie to survive. Thanks to you. I stared at it for a long time, longer than I expected, because that felt like justice. Not the gavel, not the agents, not the shredded empire, but a brother safe, a child protected, a cycle broken. I won't lie, some days I still wake up with clenched fists. Some nights I still dream of my mother saying my name like it meant something. But those days are rare now, and when they come, I open the drawer where I keep my badge in the folder. Not because I need to revisit the fire, but to remember that I made it through, that I turned ash into blueprint, that I walked into the lion's mouth with nothing but truth in my hands, and I walked out, whole, quiet, and completely undeniably mine. The confrontation you imagine where everything is said, the apologies are real, and closure wraps itself neatly in a bow doesn't happen in life. But sometimes you get something quieter, harder, more real. A chance to stand where the wound began and know it no longer owns you. For me, that came in the form of a request. The federal prosecutor in charge of my parents' case called to ask if I'd give a statement during sentencing. Not testimony, not cross-examination. Just a few words to the court that record the room. I could have declined, could have let the facts speak, let the ledgers and forged accounts and sealed affidavits carry the weight. But I said yes, because there's something sacred about taking up space, especially where you were once erased. The sentencing hearing took place in a bigger courtroom, federal, no longer family. The walls felt colder, the rules stricter. But I'd never felt more grounded. I wore all black, not for mourning, but for clarity. I didn't come to perform grief. I came to mark a death, the death of their version of me. Robert and Janice Ellison sat at the defendant's table, looking smaller somehow. Not physically, but spiritually. My father's hair had grayed at the temples. His tie was crooked. My mother looked brittle, like she was holding in too many thoughts at once and couldn't decide which one to let out. They didn't look at me. They never did. The judge read the findings: fraud, wire fraud, identity theft, tax evasion, 17 counts. The final recommendation, 15 years with no early release restitution to impacted parties and permanent forfeiture of assets tied to the crime. My parents sat still. My mother blinked twice. My father's jaw flexed. And then the judge said, "Ms. Ellison, would you like to speak?" I stood, walked to the center. No podium, just words. I didn't read from notes. I didn't clear my throat. I looked straight at them and said I was 12 when I first caught a number that didn't add up. You told me I didn't understand. I was 17 when I asked about the offshore payments. You told me to stop embarrassing you. I was 29 when I discovered you'd used my name. You called me unstable. I was 31 when you sued me for trying to stop it. You told the world I was dangerous. And now I'm 34. I'm not your daughter anymore. I'm the person who ended the lie. And for the record, I didn't need revenge. I needed the truth. And I'm standing in it now. I turned, walked back to my seat. No tears, no applause, just truth spoken aloud for once without consequence. After the hearing outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed the steps. Microphones, flashes, questions shouted like hail. Ms. Ellison, was this personal? Do you forgive them? Was it hard turning on your own family? I didn't answer any of them. I walked through the noise and into the parking lot where Nathan was waiting beside his car. Arms crossed, eyes steady. You said it, he said. I did. You okay? Better than I thought I'd be. He looked out at the horizon. You did what no one else could. No, I said. I just stopped pretending they were people I still needed. We didn't hug, we didn't cry. We just stood there quietly, like survivors of the same fire now finally outside the smoke. A week later, a letter arrived at my apartment. No return address. Just my name, written in that same careful cursive I hadn't seen in years. Inside was a single sheet, my mother's handwriting. I don't know how we got here. I don't expect forgiveness. But I see you now, and I hope one day you'll let yourself rest. No signature, no defense, just that. I didn't reply. Not because I hated her, but because sometimes the only real answer is silence. Not avoidance, but release. I burned the letter in a bowl on my balcony, watched the words curl into ash, felt something uncoil in my chest as if the war I'd carried inside for a decade had finally laid down its sword. A month later, I returned to the family home, what used to be the Ellison estate, now in foreclosure. The marble floors were dusty. The portrait of our family had been removed, leaving a clean, pale square on the wall where it used to hang. I walked through the empty rooms, kitchen, office, my old bedroom. I stood in the center of it all and whispered, I survived you, not angrily, not bitterly, just truthfully. This was the final confrontation. Not with them, with the story. The one I'd inherited but never agreed to. And finally, I could set it down. These days, people ask me what it felt like to bring down my own parents, to expose their empire, to end the name that paid for my childhood home, my dance lessons, my first car. I don't say much, because no answer really fits. It didn't feel like triumph. It felt like excavation, like digging through rubble and realizing the house you thought you were born in was always just a set. And what hurts more than the lie is knowing you clung to it for so long, but I'm not ashamed of that anymore. After the sentencing, I moved. Not far. Just out of the city, a little place near the edge of Virginia, a converted fire station with brick walls and big windows. No legacy, no portraits, no whispers through the drywall. Just space. Quiet. Air that didn't carry judgment. For the first time in my life, I decorated a home, not to impress or to hide, but just for me. Books, plants, mismatched mugs, a cat named Cypher who bites the mail. It's not glamorous, but it's mine. I still work with Treasury, though more remotely now. My work is quieter, more personal. I consult on financial abuse cases, mostly domestic, sometimes corporate. I've become the woman you call when you suspect the man with 6 LLCs is hiding a pattern of theft. When a teenager's credit has mysteriously tanked before they've ever had a debit card. When a woman fleeing her husband can't access the accounts with her name on them. I don't save the world, but I unbury it, one false statement at a time. Last spring, I gave a talk at a women's college in New England. The topic was data as self-defense. It wasn't a story about revenge. It was about how paper can become power, how your name, when protected, can become a weapon instead of a wound. One student came up to me afterward, tiny voice, big eyes. She said, "My stepfather's using my mom's identity." I didn't think anyone would believe me. I gave her my card. Send everything I said. We'll make them believe you. And sometimes, on quiet days, Nathan sends pictures. Of Olivia riding a bike. Of their dog eating his sock. Of a birthday cake they made too lopsided but still ate anyway. He writes, "Still safe, still smiling. You did this." And I write back, "We did." Because he was part of it too. He knew what it cost. He walked away earlier, but he didn't forget. We both had to burn the same bridge to reach different shores. I haven't heard from my parents again, Their assets were liquidated, their reputation gone. They live somewhere quiet now under different names with new stories to tell strangers who don't know what they did. And that's fine. Let them spin new lies. I'm not chasing truth from them anymore. I am the truth. And I finally believe that's enough. I still have the folder, the original one. Not for revenge, not even for memory, but to remind myself you were right, even when no one clapped, even when they called you insane, even when they used your name to commit crimes and swore you'd imagined it. You were right, and you stayed steady. There's something holy in being underestimated. They didn't see me coming, not because I was hiding, but because they refused to believe I had the spine to fight. They thought I'd fold, but I didn't. I unfolded. And if you're reading this, if you've ever been gaslit, silenced, erased by the people who were supposed to hold you, then hear me clearly. You are not crazy. You are not too much. You are not disloyal for telling the truth, and you are not broken beyond repair. You may feel alone now. You may even feel invisible. But invisibility isn't weakness. Sometimes it's preparation. For the day you walk back in, not to be welcomed, but to dismantle the walls they built around you. And you'll do it without yelling, without begging, without apology. You'll do it with documents, with facts, with a folder that changes everything. My name is Kara Ellison. I am not someone's daughter, not anymore. I am the line they never thought I'd cross. I am the file they thought I'd never open. I am the sentence they never thought I'd finish. And I am still here, standing, free, whole, and finally home.